Good evening, ladies, gentlemen. This is the African Governance Institute for Development, and we are having our webinar for the month of June, our first of two webinars for the month of June. And today we'll be talking about encouraging youth and women participation in public governance. We're talking about the challenges and opportunities. Welcome everyone as you are joining us. You may want to put in the comment section where you're joining us from. I know we have people not just from Nigeria that have promised to be here. So once I can find your comments, I will start to acknowledge you. Welcome Adelayo, Kelechi, welcome. Elizabeth, welcome. And everyone, welcome. We're here to talk about good governance and increasing youth and women participation. Kelechi Opara is tuning in from Lagos, and it's good to have you here. So very quickly, we have so much to talk about. Usually I would wait for a few minutes to let more people come in, but I'm so excited and raring to go because we have our chairman in the house, one who clearly has not just talking, but also walking the talk. Samson Itodo, and I would quickly read his profile so that you have a sense of who you have that will be taking us this evening. So Samson Itodo is an experienced community organizer and development practitioner with 2 decades of experience in constitution building, governance reforms, and electoral governance, civic engagement, and political organizing. He serves as the executive director of YIAGA Africa, and I'm sure you all may have at one point or the other heard of YIAGA Africa. And he's the founding convener of the Not Too Young to Run movement. Again, something that was very historic, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go on. He provides strategic policy advice to parliamentary committees, electoral commissions, political parties, and civil society organizations and academic institutions. In 2018, Samson was appointed by the Gates Foundation as a goalkeeper and honored by the NDI, which is the National Democratic Institute, Washington, D.C., as the 2018 Rising Democracy Leader in Africa. He was also inducted into the 100 Most Influential Young Africans by the African Youth Award in 2017. Samson is a member of the board of Kofi Annan Foundation and the board of advisors of International IDEA. He previously served as lead consultant for International IDEA on developing a strategy for mitigating electoral and political violence in Africa. He also serves as a research facilitator for the United States Institute for Peace and the National Assembly Institutional Reform Committee. Samson leads one of Nigeria's largest citizens movements on electoral integrity, Watching the Vote. And I'm sure if you remember 2023, Samson was always on channels. If I don't remember anything, he was the face of talking to us about several things. Watching the Vote is a citizen-led election observation initiative promoting electoral integrity using technology and data. He has led international election observation missions to Ghana, Kenya, Liberia, Sierra Leone, United States of America, and South Africa. Samson Itodo holds a bachelor's and master's degree in law, both from the University of Jos and a master's of public policy from the Blavatnik School of Government, which is at the University of Oxford. He teaches election law at the Nassau State University, where he currently serves as a visiting scholar on election law. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, let us welcome with me this evening, Samson Itodo. Welcome, my brother. Thank you for being here this evening. I'm sure we're going to have a very good conversation, and it's good to see Oluwabukola Olatunji from Oyo State, Samson Adegoke, welcome, Yewande Ojo, welcome, Olajimo, welcome. So let's get straight into it. I'm sure we'll have more people join and ask questions. We will talk for about 40 minutes, and we'll leave about 20 minutes or so for questions from the audience, and we will be cued in by our moderator. So let's get going. So Samson Itodo, your name is synonymous to not too young to run. At least that was how I first of all discovered you. And not too young to run, for many that are not from Nigeria, was a movement that became a bill, that became a law, and it was about reducing the age of young lawmakers. So Samson, why did you do this? What drove you into it? And then maybe the second leg of the question is, since then we've had two sets of elections. What are your thoughts? Are you seeing the type of impact you thought you would see when you started this movement?
Well, thank you very much, Shay, and good evening to everyone, or afternoon, wherever. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're joining this discussion. Well, thanks, Shay, for the invitation to be part of this very important discussion. Important for a lot of reasons, because this generation is the time for young people, is the time for women. And so I'm delighted that we're having this discussion about how can we alter the balance of power to make it possible for these two communities that historically have been marginalized, to participate actively in the political process. I think when you think about, the Not Too Young to Run movement and the campaign, it was simply a generation of young people who were just tired, with the status quo. And it was a status quo that excluded young people from actively participating in politics. It was a status quo that saw political parties not, afford young people the opportunity to be nominated as candidates. Or it was one where family dynasties, were becoming the order of the day. And so you had this recycling of political leaders that come from a particular family or a particular generation. And we thought that it was time to address some of the obstacles, that prevented young people from getting into office. But I just want to make a point that when you think about Not Too Young to Run, it wasn't just getting young people into office. We were just fed up with the quality of leadership, because Nigeria, including Africa, was experiencing leadership crisis. It's one where the business of politics was not driven by a commitment to advancing the public good. It was more about appropriating political power to do two things. One, for primitive accumulation of wealth, and secondly, to settle inter-elite wars. And it wasn't just about the common good. And so we thought that using the instrumentality of a campaign that seeks to reduce the age for office, we're going to get young people interested in politics, but also try to open up the space to get more young people into politics. And that was why, we led the struggle for the Not Too Young to Run. What people don't know, it was actually a 10-year struggle. And it was about consistency, even though it was single issue, but we just wanted to disrupt the political space. And to a large extent, I think young people achieved that. Because when you think about Not Too Young to Run, it's not about me, it's not about all the other leaders in the movement. It was about a generation that was determined to alter their constitution from the streets with their phones and building a strong alliance with a section of the older generation that cared about generational equity.
Fantastic. I love the fact it wasn't just because that is probably a misconception. I was just about young people coming into office, and I've heard you say once that youth is not an ideology, because young people would always have different points of view, but particularly, stopping the status quo that wasn't reflecting the common good of society. I'll move a little bit further, and you started talking about it. You started talking about obstacles, challenges, and when I get to speak to young people at different events, they're a myriad of issues they bring up, which I'm sure you know all of them. One of them is funding. How do we, you guys say we should run, and then you put the money for the form at 100 million, for example. So there's the funding issue, and maybe I should list a few of them, and then you can talk to us about them. So they obviously, clearly, there's the funding issue. Young people would say to you, there's the party politics, and old order kind of preserve the old order. And so when they want to pick, they kind of tend to pick people from their own generation, as it were, and then say the youth should become youth leader in the party, or whatnot. And then people will tell you about God. I don't have a godfather, and I don't have this, and I don't have that. Then obviously the violence issue, which young people would easily throw at you. I've run for office, so I am also very much aware of all of these things, and the degree to which people put weight to them may not actually be what is real. But anyway, I promise to list it out as my team asked me to. Then there's culture, there's societal norms, there's the knowledge gap. How do I even go about it? And all of these issues. So the question then is, what will you say to women and youth that want to participate, but these challenges just seem insurmountable? How should they go about it?
Well, I don't know, Shay, you remember we had a discussion in Lagos. Was it before the 2023 elections?
Yes.
And when you talked about your experience, and by the way, you said you ran. I think for people who don't know, he ran and won. So he was a member of the legislature. And I'll just say three things.
Right.
I agree with some of the challenges, but I have never run for public office.
Mm-hmm.
And so whatever I say is based on one, my long years of study in this subject area, but also working closely with people who have run for office. I think the first major challenge is at the individual level.
Yeah.
And to fix the individual level challenges, I think we need to understand the nature, the structure, and the consequence for contesting for power. Because power is not what you buy from the shelves in the market. You actually fight and you struggle for power. And so if you think you're going to go into politics and power is just going to be given to you, or you're just going to win elections without, struggle, then I think you've got to review that mindset. So a lot of people just feel that, oh no, it's elections, it's contest for power. No? So they're going to go into it believing and thinking, their magnanimity, it's enough to actually give them the nomination and actually win elections. No, you need more than that. So at that individual level. But for those who understand what it takes to run for office, some of them get scared, they're intimidated, and they pull back. The very few like yourself, who decide to defy all odds and get into the race. Some survive and some don't. The point I am making is politics in our context, election in our context, is viewed as war. So if you're going to be running, just be prepared for war, sadly. And the reason is the do or die nature and the zero-sum nature of our politics. And what I see as one of the challenges is young people and women don't spend time to understand what is this phenomenon called politics. What is this thing they're actually getting into? And I say that if you want to solve society's problem, you don't have to run for office to solve society's problem. So solving problems, even though it's one of the reasons why you run for office, but it's not enough. Actually, if you remember, I asked you, and you told me how much you spend. And I asked myself, I asked you the question, is it really worth it with all the stress that you have to undergo? So that's the individual level. You've got to conquer yourself first and tell yourself, hey, this thing is not a tea party, right? It takes a lot, and are you prepared and ready to do that? But even at that level, it's also the whole notion of compromise. Because let no one tell you politics is without compromise. You must compromise. You have to make compromise. The fundamental question is whether you're going to be compromising on your values or you're going to be renegotiating your values. And those are very important individual questions that you must deal with. I think the point about funding, about the party politics, those things exist. But at an individual level, there are certain questions that you must be prepared to answer as an individual. And your answers to those questions will determine and shape how you're going to respond to the other institutional as well as the other community challenges. So that's that about, at the individual level. I think that the cost of politics is high. And when you think about cost, it's not just the financial cost.
Of course.
It's a cost to your health, it's a cost to your finances, it's a cost, even to your relationships.
Absolutely.
So when you say cost, it's not just the financial cost, but the financial costs are very high. Now, if you cannot, as an individual, if you don't have the emotional bent, if you don't have the strength to deal with betrayal and blackmail, don't just think about venturing into politics in Nigeria. It's not for you. Because you're going to be betrayed. In politics, people are going to come to you and tell you, oh my God, you are their God on earth. They will vote for you. They will do everything for you. On the day of the election, if you are lucky that those people show up, praise God. When they show up, they might not be voting for you. They might be voting for someone else. In politics, your campaign manager, someone whom you trust, might have been planted by your opponent as part of their own political strategy. So you have to be ready as an individual, because you can have all the money, right? You can even be the nominee of the candidate of your party, but you have to deal with these fundamental questions. I think that when you look at the political parties, no party will serve you. No party that is serious about winning elections serve you party nomination, just free of charge. Especially for those strong parties, right? The stakes are very high in those elections. And so for high stake elections, they're very competitive. And so the question to ask yourself is, how have you contributed to the development of your party? A lot of time, I see young people wait until it's 1 year to the elections. They show up and then expect that parties will give them a party nomination. It doesn't work that way. You have to pay your dues. You have to contribute to the development of that particular political party. And also note that running for office is a long game. It's a long game. You have to be prepared to play that game. But then you need to ensure that your vision for running for office is clear. And I've said this repeatedly. I would rather vote for an older person who can solve problems than to vote for a young person who does not have the competence, the character, and the capacity to run for office. Because what we seek is solutions to our problems, and not people who are young but lack the capacity to run for office. So these are, fundamental questions. I agree with some of those challenges. That's a given, but there are some bigger challenges that we need to address, and they are not written in books. Ask people who have run for office, and they will share their experience with you.
Excellent. You've spoken as if you've been running for office for for a while, Samson.
I've spoken because I've been hobnobbing with people like you.
You said a few things that I wanted to touch on. Just like every venture, there are risks, and you really need to sit down and first of all understand the risks and how do you de-risk or how do you mitigate the risks involved. Because hey, violence, yes, of course you have it there, but one of the things I experienced in my time is you would have people that will come and join you, and their very presence of being around you is a deterrence to some other people. So there's so many things involved that you really don't know until you get into the ring. And you also said something that made me laugh. There was a woman that she sold things to students, so she was very popular and had a lot of influence with students in the tertiary institution in my constituency at the time. And she promised us heaven and earth, and in fact almost wanted us to compromise our values by asking us to do certain things, which we refused. But on the day of the election, we found out that she was the chief campaigner of our opponent, and she was mobilizing heavily for our opponent. And these are real life situations, So absolutely, you've spoken so true. We really need to sit down. It's like, I meet young people say, I want to be governor, and I'm asking, if you worked in Shell or any of the, do you just wake up one morning and say you want to be MD? Does it just happen like that? Do you think because it's politics and I'm should move off? I struggle to understand that, and that's why I love what you said. It's a long game.
You actually said this. One of the things that I also consider a trend that's problematic is you see a young person who makes the first attempt, wins elections, and rather than consolidate and build, they are seeking for upward mobility. So I've seen situations where a young person, for the first time, got into State House of Assemblies because we won elections, in the last election cycle. Does not mean that you are ready to run for the office of a governor. Sometimes we need to be careful as a generation and understand that you need to build your own political structure. And it's good to consult. I'm not saying upward mobility is bad. I'm just saying that there is a time for everything. And we've seen where people just aspire for higher positions and then they lose their people, they lose that particular seat. And it's important, and for those who are actually in office, to actually think about their political trajectory and make very conscious and intentional steps.
I think two cardinal sins of politicians, two that I always share with people. The first is we usually have an overestimated value of self. Sometimes it is because those around you, oh, you're the best, and you surround yourself with yes men, and they seem to, over a period of time, sow seeds of you're ready. I mean, I did a post recently on my Instagram jokingly saying my boss used to say then that even if they call you an elephant, you may answer them, but you are not an elephant, but you'll be answering. The day elephants are having a meeting, don't go there. You are not an elephant. No matter what people are saying around you, if you go there, the elephants will trample upon you. And it's an overestimated value of self. The second one I've seen, especially with young politicians as well, is impatience. And which is what you just said. There is this, I don't know what it is. Like you said, you're in office one term and the next thing I'm going to not just the next step, the highest step. If it is really about service, then I'm not sure, you should be in a hurry to jump up when there's still so much to do where you are. So let me move on. I want to read some stats, and I know you work with an organization that data is your foundation, but I saw some things online. I'll bet maybe not as recent as 2024, but I want you to talk to us about it. Across Africa, we seem to have better women participation in East Africa and South Africa. So, for example, I noticed that South Africa has 46% women in office, in parliament. I mean, Zimbabwe 31%, Uganda 33%, Tanzania 37%. Even our neighbor Cameroon, which you probably cast as Central Africa, is 34%. But then when we get to Nigeria, we're hearing 5.8, 6.7%, which according to the research I saw online, Nigeria ranks as the bottom 5 globally for women representation. And it's just worrisome, if you like. So first of all, what are your thoughts on if you like, how do we solve this problem that is there? Some people have spoken about quota system. Some people have spoken about several things. What do you think is the way out in terms of increasing participation of women and youth in our government, especially seeing the figures in Nigeria are really worrisome?
Well, I think it's troubling that in Nigeria we have an abysmal level of women participation. And there are lots of reasons account for this. The first thing is these men who are in political office are not ready to negotiate power. They are not ready to relinquish power because of the deeply entrenched culture of patriarchy. Now, as a society, we lose when we don't have women, in public office. And we have to consider that this is not just a human rights issue, but it's also a developmental issue. And that's a framing that I don't think that those who have the responsibility of making laws or creating those spaces have come to grasp with. It is poor. Why won't it be poor? It will be poor because economically, women are disadvantaged. And all of this is attributed to some of the factors that you mentioned. But I want to move away from the external factors such as the economy, but to look at it within political parties. Now, 2 years ago, I did this research for Westminster Foundation, where I studied 9 political parties in 9 countries in Africa. They're all liberal political parties. And what we did was to look at how candidate selection processes in those political parties impact on the emergence of female candidates. When I looked across these parties in 9 countries, one thing came up strongly, that for countries like Kenya, countries like Senegal, countries like Rwanda, countries like South Africa, there's something unique about some of the parties that we studied. And what is it? That one, in those parties, they have introduced what you call quotas. And is it our quotas manifesting as parity law, right? Like Kenya has a parity law, right? Or if you go to a place like Senegal, where they also have a parity principle within some of the political parties. Therefore, the parties are then compelled, by virtue of the provisions in their law, to field female candidates. And they don't just field these female candidates, they also support, these female candidates in the course of elections. Because you need the structure of a political party behind you to actually win elections. But if you come to Nigeria, I think this whole practice of reduced cost of nomination forms, it's not enough, because parties actually do that in Nigeria. But how many, political parties put their structure behind their female candidates? Just a few. So it needs to go beyond reducing the cost of nomination forms. The other administrative fees that women have to pay, it's also very high. Now, that's about, when you look at the political parties, and that we need to fix that. The second point is we need, by the instrumentality of law, we need, like Nigeria is advocating for creating more seats. reserve seats for women, in the National Assembly. Because we don't have proportional representation, and our electoral system is first past the post, is winner takes all, which I think needs to be reviewed so as to de-escalate the tension within our political space. Because this whole winner takes all practice is what is responsible for one, the violence in our elections, the do or die nature of our politics, but also the lack of accountability within our political space. So we need proportional representation so that, right, parties that secure certain number of votes can have seats allocated to them in the National Assembly. So it's not the party that wins simple majority that takes the entire seat. Look at South Africa with its proportional representation system, and how the different political formations are having conversations. Whether they like it or not, they must reach a settlement tomorrow when Parliament convenes. That kind of dialogue, that kind of negotiation gives a sense of belonging, but it also distributes power. Therefore, when you have proportional representation, whether it's closed or open list, parties are required and they are compelled by law to present female candidates. The third point, which might sound a bit controversial, it's about the people, it's about the society. And it's my respectful view that until voters punish political parties for not fielding women, we are not going to see any remarkable changes. Because political parties know, and based on my study, political parties know that voters, in most cases, prefer male candidates. So they field candidates that are electable because parties are interested in electoral victory. And so if female candidates will not secure a victory, which I think it's somewhat inexcusable, but that's what their reality tells them, they will field male candidates. So how do we get the public conscientized to appreciate women leadership and accept women leadership is also something that we need to do. But voters need to start punishing political parties that field only men and not field female candidates. And we have to warm up to this idea that women have what it takes to govern, they have what it takes to lead. We just need to give them the opportunity. And if we fail to give them the opportunity, then citizens and women should rise up, organize effectively, and contest for power.
So very, very, very interesting points you raised there. It's interesting as you were speaking. I once invited two lawmakers to a program I did, and they had two different views, which was strangely shocking to me. One was of the view that women are her biggest opponents as a woman herself. And she felt women were envious and would rather vote men, her opponents, than vote her. But the other person was totally different. The other person said, the strength of the women brought me into power. The strength of the women supporting me brought me into power. And then, so that question always comes to when you talk about, people punishing parties that don't field women. It seems even in some cases, the women themselves do not yet come to that sense of we need to stand with each other if we're going to start to see, the sort of, representation we want to see. So it was just interesting you said that. But Samson, before we go on, I'm sure a lot of listeners won't mind if you shared a little bit, because obviously it's probably technical for the average person, the first past the post and the proportional representation. Just very in 2-3 minutes, what's the difference? Because you've all clearly shared it, and you've used the South African experience. You were in South Africa a few weeks ago. So just quickly talk to us, and so that people can understand what you mean when you say proportional representation.
Okay. this issue about women not supporting women. But the first past the post system, which is the winner takes all, it's a system where once election is conducted between political parties and candidates, the candidate or the political party that secures majority of the votes will be declared the winner, and they will occupy that particular seat. So it's a system, an electoral, it's a design of an electoral system. And for first part, the post is winner takes all. So if you have a parliament, for instance, if you're in Nigeria, you have a national assembly, there are 469 seats. Let's use the House of Reps. There are 360 seats. Now, those 360 seats represent federal constituencies, and they are demarcated or designated by virtue of population, unlike the Senate, that is based on equality of states, and you have 3 senators per state. For the National Assembly, for the House of Reps, is by population. So if you have 360 constituencies, in a first past the post system like we have, once election is conducted, the party that wins the majority of votes in each constituency will be declared the winner. So for instance, if party X scores the highest number of votes, or most of the candidates it presents for those constituencies win the elections, they would all be in the National Assembly, in the House of Reps. That's what we have currently. That's why you can see party A has 200 members, the other has 100, because they won their elections in their constituency. In a proportional system, what happens in a proportional system is that those 360 seats in the House of Reps, those seats, right, will be allocated to parties on the basis of the votes that they score. So this is a classic example. So in South Africa, so let's say you have those 360 seats. So if, in the National Assembly election, Party X scores the majority of votes, and then the second party scores a certain number of votes, the first or third runner-up. The first or third runner-up will be allocated some seats in the House of Reps by virtue of the number of votes that they scored. So what you have is a diverse parliament, a diverse House of Reps. And so what it does is it gives every political party an opportunity to have a seat in the National Assembly, because elections requires spending money, a lot of effort. So what that system does is, hey, all your effort is not in vain, because you still have what? You still have 1 or 2 seats that will be allocated to. So there's a lot of seat calculation, that happens in that particular system. Or proportional representation, unlike first past the post, it's not winner takes all. In proportional representation, the winner does not take all. The loser, in some sense, also has some seats in the National Assembly. And in some cases, if you're operating a parliamentary system like South Africa does, there's a certain number of seats you must have to do what? To secure majority to elect the head of the government. And that's the president of South Africa. And what you see in South Africa, because the ANC didn't secure the required number of seats, even though they got majority of votes in the election, they did not secure majority of seats because they lost about 71 seats to the other parties. They cannot unilaterally constitute a government. They have to negotiate with the other parties that have seats. So they build this coalition, and those coalitions are based on certain agreements. And so if they reach an agreement tomorrow, then we will see the election of the president. I don't know if this explains this. This thing.
Yes, you did it just like a professional lecturer would do it. Very, very well explained. Thank you. I think partly one of the issues that will be going through the minds of Nigerians is what party? Because even when people vote, they vote because of candidates in most cases. So, what you've just described shows the strength of political parties that are working, and not just political parties being used as vehicles for elections. And I think talking about political parties is certainly a different topic we would have to go in at a later time. I want to ask a question or two questions, and please, if you have any question, kindly start to put it in the chat box. We will put it up after Samson answers these two questions. The first, because I started off this question talking about quota system, and I know in Sierra Leone they had a Gender Equality and Women Empowerment Act, which mandated 30% quota. And at the election they had in 2023, they had 41 women, which gave them 30.4%. So they met the target. And then I also know that in Benin, they also had a new electoral code, which reserved 24 seats for women. Obviously, if you're thinking about the first past the post system, the question is, which constituencies are going to allow or are going to yield the floor for women? And if a man is contesting, for example, he doesn't want to lose the right to leave it for a woman. So what do you think about laws creating quota system, not just at the party level, but even in parliaments? That's my first question. And then the second question, which every time we talk about young people, we bring in technology. And maybe you should talk to us. How do you see technology playing a part in our politics? Somebody jokingly told me, "Can't we do ward meetings online? Can't we do online ward meeting?" And so on and so on. And this is people thinking of how they can use tech to ramp up things in the political and governance space. So help us with the quota question, and then tech and young people, and then we will go straight into the questions from the audience and just really open it up. Thank you.
So first, quotas are temporary. They are special measures. They are special measures that seek to address a structural injustice or structural inequity in a political system. And what it just does is it recognizes that there's a certain part or segment of society that have been marginalized over time, right? And so how do we introduce mechanisms that provides and facilitate access, to the electoral space? So you have legislated quotas. In cases where you have legislated quotas, it is clearly stated in the law that a certain percentage, of women shall be either elected or appointed into office. Those ones are legislated, so they are already in statute books. But you also have quotas that are not legislated, especially at the party level. So you can have party mechanisms, party internal documents that provide for certain quotas. So for instance, if a party is constituting its leadership, it can say that no two genders shall occupy a certain office. So it means that you can have a man and a woman in any sort of appointments, either at the party leadership or even at the committee level, or even in the list submitted by political parties. So quotas does help. They are a strategy, they are an option. And if you practice it for a couple of years, what happens is it increases the number of women who are in public office. For instance, Kenya has women quotas. And so on the day of elections, there's a separate ballot box for women. And so those women, are voted into office. It's exclusive just, for women. But you also have appointive seats in legislature. Gambia has appointive seats. The president can nominate 5 people to the parliament. Kenya also has that. Uganda, does have that. And these appointive positions or appointive opportunities provide a space for women and young people to get into office. I think at the heart of this, these measures are introduced because of the very complex nature of our politics that is toxic and does not create spaces for these marginalized groups. And so if democracy is about inclusion, then we've got to institute mechanisms that advance inclusion. The second question about technology, it's brilliant to have your ward meeting on on Zoom, have it online. But please ensure that those who you're meeting online have electoral value. What I mean is, I hope they are members of your constituency. I hope they are in your wards. I hope they are members of your political party. Because running for office, right? It's in different stages. It's a cycle. There's a pre-election, there's during and post-election. Now, pre-election requires a lot of underground and on-the-ground mobilization. Technology can help you, fast track that. You can build databases, you can reach people using technology. So you can use technology for what? For mobilization, right? You can use technology for promoting, your ideology, your manifesto. You can also use technology for providing oversight on the process. With with AI, there's so much that can be done. You can use AI, just to one map locations where you would deploy your party agents, especially polling units or polling stations that require additional oversight because of the influence of your opponent. You can also use AI to actually monitor INEC's either deployment for voter registration or even the day of elections. And there are several things that can be done. You can use AI or chatbot, AI-powered, chatbots to do what? To avail citizens and those in your communities with access to information. So technology can play a critical role. You can even use technology to fundraise as well. But at the end of the day, technology is not an end. It's a means to an end. It's a tool that complements all the other non-technological tools of mobilization. But before you think about deploying technology for elections or for campaigns, note that politics is local, politics is about people, understand your people very well, know what they want, know where to reach them, know how to talk to them, and use the very tools that they can relate with, to speak with them. But does technology present an opportunity? Oh, it presents unprecedented opportunities.
In other words, go to the grassroots. Do not leave, do not leave it online. I think you've answered that question brilliantly, Samson. You like everything in life, you must know your audience. And with the digital divide we have, you just can't afford to say you're sitting online when majority of your audience are not online and think that will work. But certainly, I'm also happy you were able to, show how technology can certainly help us in the politics and governance space. We'll go to the comment box. The moderator can help me by putting up the questions as they come. It says, Aria Hassan is talking about how do we change this kind of notion in I presume they're talking about the first past the post and the proportional representation system that we have.
So how do we change this kind of notion in our electoral? So I guess did you say this person is referring to the electoral system design?
I believe so.
Well, you need your constitution. We need to fix our constitution. And by the way, this is not new because Justice Way's committee did recommend proportional representation in our legislative governance system. So it's not new. We just have to fix our constitution, amend the constitution, to change this sort of system to a proportional representation system. Sierra Leone, just last year, before the elections, they did introduce proportional representation in their parliament, in their legislature. And that saw an increase in the number of women who made it to the National Assembly. And I think we can also do that for our own context. It just takes amending the Constitution, ensure high stakeholder engagement to secure the buy-in, but also get political parties And it's sad that in our climate, bipartisanship isn't the practice, it isn't the culture, and our political elites are not just interested in building consensus on critical political reforms that can advance and fast track our development.
Which is a major problem, Samson, when those that are in the system do not want this change. How does reform happen? It's easier to keep the system its status quo than change it for a new order that is going to disrupt things. How do you surmount this?
I don't know. Because the big question is what makes policymakers act? What makes policymakers take decisions? Pressure to do miracles, persuasion can, right? Maybe their own personal experiences can, but I don't think there's one reason that we can, hold on to say this is the one reason that forces policymakers to act. It could be a game of interest. If their interest aligns and they see that the opportunity cost is not high, then they will actually take a decision. But having said that, when you think about the Not Too Young to Run story, it was a 10-year struggle. Young people were consistent and they kept the pressure. Anyone who tells you democracy is not a struggle, it's not a lifelong journey, is not being truthful to you. If you want to see change happen, because change is a process, it's not an event, you have to keep pushing. That's why we need the resilience, we need the energy, and we need the staying power to keep the pressure. And if we're going to get anything from this democracy, it's going to take active citizenship and nothing more. Because governors and the president and our legislators are not just going to govern because of their benevolent nature. No, that's not why. It's not because they like us or they want our faces. No. We need citizens' pressure. That's how democracy survives.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you. So the questions are coming in quick and fast. So I'll just let you take them as they come on the screen.
How do women navigate politics in a claim that seems... The question is, have there been women who've been successful? Yes, there have been. There are 4 senators in the Senate. We may not like that number, it's too low. But they're able to, and I use Senator Natasha Akpoti-Oduang, who comes from Kogi State. Think about her story. She fought her way to the Senate. That is how you win in a context like Nigeria. You have to struggle. And I think she's an inspiration to women because the governor of her state not only intimidated, they did everything possible to ensure she didn't clinch victory. But she was connected to her people. And when they say politics is local, it's indeed local. If you want to win, then get close to your people. Be popular amongst your people, and people will rise for you. But when you're not close with your people, you don't have any grassroots appeal, then it is possible for the politicians and the men to just intimidate you and whisk you away. So you're not inferior, and don't feel inferior. There are successful cases that we've seen. Ireti Kingibe, who ran in the FCT, defeated, Philip Aduda of the PDP, who had been PDP senator for only God knows how long. So there are positive stories. We're inspired by those stories, and we will get more women in the fray.
Absolutely, power is with the people. All right, next question.
This Pascal. The first part of your question is very interesting. Overnight meetings and conversations. For conversations, for demands, I can understand. But overnight meetings, my brother, be ready. You will have overnight. It's you can't, and don't think it's unique to Nigeria. No, it's everywhere across the world. Because for politicians, 24 hours is not enough. Even as a business person, we struggle with just 24 hours. So those overnight meetings, you will keep having those overnight meetings. And I'm not here to sugarcoat anything. I'm telling you the way it is. Be ready to have those overnight meetings. Be very ready to have those conversations. Don't be scared about those conversations. Because politics is not dirty, like people would say. It's the players that are dirty. If you hold your ground, you can change those conversations and change those demands. That's why I said you don't have to compromise on your values. You can stand for, what is true. The reason is you're coming into a space that has been captured, a space that has been defined by a set of values for over time. So don't expect any cultural turnaround because you are just showing up. No, you're not, no, not at all. But can politics be practiced without bitterness? Capital NOPE. Because they are humans that are involved in politics, right? They are not just machines, they are humans, they have emotions.
Mm.
So just be prepared. It's what you do with the bitterness. And I mentioned if you're not ready, because there's a do or die approach towards politics in our own time. You do or die nature. You think Trump and Biden aren't involved in the politics of bitterness? No, you just need to. All you need to do is to tune to American channels and then look at the ads. Then you know that there's actually politics of bitterness here. But I get the point that you're making that as a new generation, right, we have an opportunity to redefine the kind of politics that we want to practice. And it's one where we have respect for rules, it's one where we have respect, for each other. And there are certain red lines we should not cross because politics brings out the worst in us. And it's so disappointing that we condescend to certain levels that question our humanity as a people.
I think that's a very good point.
What do you think about stereotypes in the political sphere? Well, some of these stereotypes are narratives. You see, politics is a game of narratives because you want to shape people's behavior. You want to influence political behavior. And the way to influence political behavior is to use language, is to use stereotypes, is to use narratives. And so sometimes people exploit these negative stereotypes, either about people, about their identity, or about their culture. And it's sad. That happens in a society where everything goes, in a society where impunity reigns, in a society where there is no accountability. And so it's unfortunate that there are negative stereotypes targeted at a people. There has to be a consequence for it. But I also think that as a young person or a woman who wants to go into politics, if your opponent condescends to the level where they appropriate negative stereotypes and hate speech just to attack your person, I think that you should go higher and be the one who is more mature, who is more decent. Do not come down to their level, like it's often said. When they go low, we go high. It's a very powerful message that you don't, on the basis of politics, compromise on certain values, especially that which relates to human dignity and also mutual respect. Because if you play like them, you become like them. And so that opportunity that you have for transformation is lost. The moral authority that you build and have when you get into politics is lost. And we do need moral authority if we're going to fix the malaise that have bedeviled our political space. Because legal authority is not enough. It has to be some form of moral authority. And I think that new generation politicians should actually command that form of authority.
Excellent. People study to be communication experts, to know how to, craft messages that move the masses. Politics is usually a war of words, and you must stay above the line. You mustn't condescend to, the way everybody else is playing it. I love the way you answered that. All right, let's take the next question. Time is almost up.
Thanks, Boyega, for those kind words. How can young people overcome the issue of finances? Let me say the uncomfortable truth. Well, it's not quite uncomfortable, but it's a reality. You can win elections without spending millions of naira. There are people who I know who have won elections without spending huge amounts of money. And maybe Shay will not agree with me, or he might, but if you run for elections in certain parts of Nigeria,
Hmm.
it is cheaper than in other parts of the country.
True.
So when you're speaking to some young people from a certain part of the country and they share their experience with you, some of them didn't spend a huge amount of money. What is more expensive, actually, depending on the party that you run, is securing the party nomination. That's where most of them actually spend a huge amount of money because of the commercialization of the nomination process, because of the delegates procurement that happens in the course of primary. So that's where they spend huge amounts of money. But then, if you're loved by your people, and I say this, see, there was a Paul Murigi in Kenya who ran for office at 23 and he beat the incumbent Jubilee Party. He ran as an independent. Paul was 23. Do you know when he started preparing to run for office? When he was 18. It took him 5 years. He invested 5 years. He was always moving from Nairobi to his country. He moved and lived with his people. He didn't even have a bicycle. He was always walking.
Hmm.
And he was one of those young parliamentarians when he won for elections. The former president of Kenya, Uhuru, bought him an SUV, which trended online. Why? Because his people knew him. He related with his people. And trust me, you can't have any meeting without spending certain amount of money. But if you are loved by your people and your people know you, people will show up for your meetings and not expect anything. But those are exceptional cases. The point I'm trying to make is it is possible, but you have to make the investment in building huge social capital. Doesn't mean you will not spend money, you would spend. And I honestly, except I want to lie to you and I want to be idealistic, in the next 5 or 10, 20 years, do not think that the cost for politics is going to reduce. It's actually, if what we know is what we know, even in 2027, the cost is going to go high. This is not even factoring inflation or the other issue. It's going to go high. And our politicians are not ready to regulate campaign financing.
All right. Thank you so much, Samson. If you don't mind, we have just 2 more questions. If you're able to take them, and then we'll bring it to a close.
You have to make sure your voice is heard loud, especially as a woman, especially when you're a legislator, because the older men choke the voice. Democracy is about noise making. It's he who screams, who shouts the loudest. That is the truth. But you can make your noise a noise with quality. And I'll just tell you 3 things. 1, let me start with what is most crucial. You see, the older legislators, because we are a society that believes culturally, our elders believe they should be worshipped. Our elders believe they should be respected. Our elders, most of them, don't like to be challenged. Now, as a young person, a young woman or a legislator, I think you need to see yourself as you need to maintain a certain identity in that parliament. And it's one where, 1, you always provide alternatives to the problems. So what I'm saying in essence is your intellectual capital, your contributions should be one that provides solutions and always be a solution provider. Let it be known in that legislature that if it comes to taking serious decisions, you would make contributions that would have overall impact. So be known for that. Secondly, you need to build alliances. You see, man, you need to learn how to manage ego and manage our elders.
Mm.
And see, if you'll be shocked at the gains you would make if you win those people to your side.
Mm.
For some of them, they just want you to acknowledge that they exist.
That's it.
For some of them, they just want you to know that they also add value. Even if they don't add any value, just make them feel it's about lobbying.
Mm.
It doesn't mean you're making any compromises. But you know what? One thing I learned in school is what you say and how you say it matters a lot. Sometimes I've seen young people who have a very good case, but because of the way they communicate it, they lose their audience and lose certain opportunities. And so we have to be very mindful and be tactical because we know the culture where we are. This is not America where you can stand up and speak to elders the way you want. In this place, the moment you do that, they will cut you out.
Yep.
So your question is, do you want to engage in effective advocacy where you have a permanent seat at the table, or you just want to disrupt negatively and be excluded? It's a decision and choice that you make. Please don't mistake me or misunderstand me. If elders and those older men, misbehave, you can call them out, but you can also do so respectfully, just because of the culture and the place we find ourselves.
Fantastic. That is really, really awesome. Samson, let me thank you, very much for the way you have answered these questions, and I think you've certainly put some points at the forefront that I think everybody should remember as they go. You've talked about the fact that this is a struggle. It's not, I think we need to, take our minds off this. It's going to be easy. Power is not served a la carte. Power has never been served a la carte. It's something people are going to struggle for, and you need to understand your compromise. You don't compromise values, but there are things you need to understand. You have to work with other. You've also emphasized power being with the people and the need to be close to the people that you want to represent, because ultimately, people can come with money and everything, and people are a lot smarter now, and they can take the money and still vote for the person that they really love, and that's why it's important to invest the time, to invest the energy, to get close to the people, and they will show up for you. And interestingly, your very last point here is how you make people feel. Extremely important. Politics full of egos, full of people that want to be acknowledged. And the way you make people feel is extremely important in that. So, Samson, I'll just give you the floor for your final words. I think the reason why we put this together was to encourage the youth and women, because we've seen a lot of distrust with government. We've seen a lot of, people losing hope. And you've spoken to us very, very intelligently this evening. So just your final words as we bring this webinar to a close.
To say thank you. Thanks. It's been a very interesting conversation. These days, complex issues around the elections, local governance, AI have been taking a lot of my time, but I'm glad that we're able to have this conversation. And really, congratulations to the Africa Governance Institute, for putting this together. And I'm very delighted to have been part of this. I think to those who have joined, I've tried to be as frank as possible, less theoretical today. So I hope that some of the key takeaways from here will be useful for you. But I'll just say this in closing, and two quick things. The first, you have to make the numbers count as young people. You have what it takes to transform our society, but you have to make the numbers count. And it begins with joining a political party, disrupting that political party, contesting for leadership positions in that group, but delivering the quality, high quality leadership that our society needs. We need Nigeria and Africa needs excellent leaders. And young people have what it takes. So please make your numbers count. The second and last thing, democracy still remains the best form of government. We love democracy. It's just that our practice of democracy in this part of the world is one that is very problematic. Please don't lose faith in democracy. Continue to support and defend democracy because it's not just the best form, but it's the one that gives you an opportunity to use your voice and bring change even in your lifetime. So thank you very much, Shay, and I'm here any day, anytime.
Thank you so much, Samson. Samson is one of our faculty members at the African Governance Institute for Development, and certainly we will be bringing him back again to continue to share insights. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your wisdom and your experience that you've shared so eloquently with us this evening. Once again, let me thank you all for joining the first of two webinars for the month of June. We've been talking to Samson Itodo, the Executive Director of YIAGA Africa, and we've been talking about encouraging youth and women participation. Please follow us on our social media platforms on X, Instagram, LinkedIn, so that you can continue to get updated with our webinars. We also recently launched our podcast, which is the African Legacy Leaders, talking about leaders from history that have shown us that as Africans, we can build by ourselves and we can build very solid structures for national development. So once again, thank you, Samson, for your time. Thank you, everyone, for being here this evening. Till we see you at our next webinar. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.